He thought giving away his limitless credit card would only reveal greed, but when his maid returned with a single humble purchase, it broke the walls around his heart and forced him to face everything he had buried. The ballroom shimmered like a dream. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across marble floors, bouncing off glasses of champagne and sequined gowns. Guests murmured in a dozen different languages, deals and gossip woven between laughter. At the center of it all stood Adrian Callister, the billionaire everyone envied, admired, or feared. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed, Adrian looked as though he belonged on the cover of every magazine at once. To the crowd, he was untouchable. To himself, he was simply hollow. He held a glass of champagne but never drank from it. The bubbles tickled his nose, yet he couldn't bring himself to sip. His gaze drifted across the party without ever resting, as if searching for someone who wasn't there. Applause broke out when a politician toasted him, but Adrian barely lifted his hand. Inside, the applause only rang as static, a reminder of how empty praise could feel when there was no one real to share it with. Adrian's life was full of people, yet devoid of connection. He could buy anything, but nothing would replace the quiet ache that gnawed at him in the stillness of night. On the other side of the mansion, where chandeliers gave way to fluorescent bulbs and polished marble gave way to scuffed linoleum, Maria Alvarez was finishing her second shift of the day. She wore her maid's uniform with quiet dignity. Her hands, reddened from scrubbing, Adrian's eyes swept the room and caught, for a fleeting second, the maid with tired hands balancing trays. He hardly knew her name, the maid was what most people called her, but in that moment, he noticed something different. Unlike the glamorous women around him, she did not preen or posture. She didn't even glance his way. That, strangely, felt more piercing than all the adoration in the room. Beside him, two women leaned closer, Veronica and Lila, socialites with laughter sharp enough to cut glass. They clung to Adrian's arm, showering him with playful remarks about his wealth, his power. "You're too serious tonight, Adrian," Lila teased, brushing her fingers against his cufflinks. "You need to loosen up. Let us show you how." Veronica's voice chimed in, teasingly, "Why don't you let us do something fun with that bottomless wallet of yours? Hand over your card, we'll make you smile." Adrian smirked faintly. To them, his card was a joke, a game. To him, it was simply another wall between himself and the world. Yet a thought sparked, reckless, absurd, but oddly freeing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his sleek black credit card, the kind with no limits. The women gasped in playful delight. "Here," he said with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Take it. Buy whatever you want. Impress me." Gasps and laughter rippled around them. Veronica snatched the card first, Lila squealing beside her. But Adrian's gaze shifted back toward the maid. Maria had just set down a tray nearby, overhearing everything, her eyes wide with confusion. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw something, loneliness maybe, in his gaze. Something that made her chest tighten. She lowered her head, nodded once and whispered, "As you wish." And just like that, the game was set. 3 women, 1 billionaire's card. By the end of it, Adrian's carefully constructed walls would no longer stand. The next morning, the city shimmered beneath a late spring sun. Veronica and Lila were the first to claim their spoils. Cameras flashed as they swept through boutiques, their arms laden with designer bags. Perfume trailed behind them as they strutted out of a jewelry store, laughing loud enough for the paparazzi to follow. "Adrian will die when he sees this diamond necklace," Veronica bragged, holding the velvet box against her throat. "Worth every penny of his limitless card." "Forget the necklace," Lila giggled. "I bought us a weekend in Monaco. Private jet, champagne towers. He'll melt when he sees us on the runway." For them, the card wasn't just money. It was validation, proof that they could command a billionaire's attention. Their laughter was sharp, echoing down Fifth Avenue like champagne bubbles bursting. But across town, Maria stood frozen in front of a small pharmacy. The black credit card felt like a weight in her pocket, heavier than gold. She had walked past the luxury boutiques, past the glittering department stores, past windows full of dresses that could have changed her life for a night. Yet her feet had carried her here. Inside, the pharmacy smelled of antiseptic and lavender. The air was quiet, interrupted only by the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Maria's fingers trembled as she picked up a small white box from the shelf, insulin for her father. She held it carefully, as though it were fragile glass. The pharmacist gave her a puzzled look when she handed over the card. It looked out of place against the dull countertop. "Are you sure this will go through?" he asked, swiping it cautiously. Maria smiled faintly. "It will." When the machine beeped, approval flashing across the screen, Maria's chest tightened with relief. Not because the billionaire's wealth had saved her, it hadn't. She would have found another way, as she always did. No, what tightened her chest was the thought of her father sleeping easier tonight. As she stepped outside, medicine in hand, she whispered under her breath, "This is the only thing worth buying." That evening, Adrian sat in his private lounge, waiting. A fire glowed in the marble hearth, casting long shadows on the walls. He expected to be amused, maybe even entertained, by the women's choices. After all, it was just a game. Veronica and Lila burst in first, radiating triumph. They spread their treasures on the table like trophies: necklaces, silk gowns, a printed itinerary for Monaco. "Do you see now?" Veronica purred, draping the diamond against her throat. "We know how to enjoy your generosity." Lila leaned close, her voice sugary sweet. "We know how to live your life, Adrian." He chuckled lightly, but his eyes barely registered the glittering jewels. His attention shifted when Maria entered the room quietly, clutching a small paper bag. She didn't place it on the table. She didn't flaunt it. She simply held it against her chest, as if protecting it. Adrian frowned. "And you? What did you buy?" Her voice was soft but steady. "Medicine." The room stilled. Veronica and Lila burst into mocking laughter, exchanging glances as though Maria had told a joke. "Medicine." Veronica sneered. "With a billionaire's card." "She could have bought herself a dress, at least," Lila added. "Instead she plays Florence Nightingale." Maria's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look at them. She looked only at Adrian. Her dark eyes held something he hadn't seen in years: honesty untainted by ambition. "For my father," she explained simply. "He's sick." This was what mattered. The mocking laughter faded into the crackling of the fire. Adrian stared at the small paper bag, his throat tight. It was absurd. He could buy 1,000 pharmacies. But her choice, it struck something raw inside him. For the first time in years, his sister's face flashed in his memory. She had suffered from the same illness before she passed. He had spent millions on doctors, hospitals, machines, but in the end, he hadn't been able to save her. Maria's quiet act of love, her refusal to use his wealth for vanity, pierced through every defense he had built. He leaned back slowly, his chest aching as though a wound had reopened. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "Why not take advantage like the others?" Maria looked down at the bag, her fingers tightening around it. "Because money doesn't change what matters. My father's health does." Her words were simple, but they fell into him like stones in a well, sinking deep into places he had buried long ago. Veronica rolled her eyes. "Adrian, don't let her fool you. She's just trying to look virtuous." But he wasn't listening. His gaze remained locked on Maria, as though he were seeing her for the first time. Later that night, when the mansion had quieted, Adrian sat alone by the fire. The image of Maria clutching the medicine burned into his mind. His chest felt heavy, almost suffocating. She had chosen what no one else would have, something selfless, something tied to love. And it broke him. For years, he had believed no one could surprise him. Tonight, a maid had undone him with a paper bag from a pharmacy. What do you think matters more, using wealth to show status, or using it to protect someone you love? Comment your thoughts below. The morning after the reveal, the mansion hummed with a different energy. Staff hurried along the polished corridors, whispering about what had happened the night before. The story of the billionaire's card had already spread among them. Some laughed at the absurdity, others shook their heads at the extravagance. But all of them spoke of Maria, the maid who had chosen medicine instead of jewels. Maria, however, wanted no part of the whispers. She scrubbed the marble steps with more force than necessary, as if the soap could erase the embarrassment that still clung to her. Every time she replayed the women's mocking laughter, her cheeks burned anew. She had not wanted to stand out. She had not wanted him to look at her with those unreadable eyes. She only wanted her father's medicine. That was all. Yet somehow, her small act had shifted something she didn't understand, and she wanted desperately to retreat into the shadows again. Adrian, meanwhile, was in his study pacing. He should have been reviewing investment portfolios or signing contracts. Instead, his thoughts circled relentlessly back to Maria. He told himself it was nothing. Coincidence. A maid with a sick father, choosing practicality. It was logical, not profound. He tried to bury the echo of his sister's memory, the way her fragile hands had once clutched the same white boxes Maria had bought. But the truth pressed against him like an uninvited guest he couldn't force out. Medicine, he muttered under his breath, leaning on his desk. Why medicine? He hated how much it mattered. He hated that a Maid's simple purchase had shaken him more than $1 billion deal ever had. The next time their paths crossed, both tried to pretend nothing had changed. Adrian entered the kitchen to find Maria polishing silverware. She froze when she saw him, her hands tightening around the cloth. He cleared his throat, his voice colder than he intended. About yesterday, he began. Don't read too much into it. Maria blinked. I wasn't. Her tone was soft, but it stung. He wanted her to argue, to challenge him, but instead she deflected, retreating back into humility. You made a practical choice, Adrian said briskly. That's all. Nothing remarkable. She set down the fork she had been polishing, her eyes flickering up to meet his. For a brief moment, he thought she might say something that would cut through the air between them. Instead, she nodded. Yes, sir. The words landed like a stone. Formal, distant. Exactly what he thought he wanted. Yet his chest tightened, unsatisfied. Veronica and Lila, on the other hand, were delighted by the tension. They sensed Adrian's unease and pounced on it. Darling, Veronica cooed as they lounged by the pool later that afternoon. Don't tell me the maid's little act impressed you? Lila smirked, twirling her sunglasses. It was pathetic, really. A billionaire's card, wasted on insulin. Adrian's jaw tightened. It wasn't pathetic, he snapped before he could stop himself. The women exchanged knowing glances, their smiles sharp. Then what was it? Veronica teased. Noble? Romantic? Adrian, please. She's just trying to look pure while the rest of us live honestly. He pushed back his chair abruptly, their laughter following him as he walked away. His temper startled even him. Why defend her? Why care at all? That night, Maria sat at her small kitchen table in her modest apartment. Her father coughed in the bedroom, but his voice was lighter than it had been in weeks. The medicine was already helping. She closed her eyes, pressing her hands together in quiet gratitude. For a moment, peace washed over her. But then her thoughts betrayed her. She saw Adrian's face again, the flash of something raw in his eyes when she told him what she had bought. She shook her head, scolding herself. No, she whispered. Don't be foolish. He was a billionaire, surrounded by women who belonged in his world. She was just the maid. Whatever flicker of connection she thought she saw was an illusion. She could not afford to dream. But illusions have a way of lingering. When Adrian lay in his vast bed that night, staring at the ceiling, silence pressing in from all sides, he heard her voice again. Because money doesn't change what matters. My father's health does. If you're ready to hear the full story, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be dropping another story just as wild as this one, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Now, let's dive right in. The words refused to leave him. They twisted into his chest until he turned onto his side, restless, angry at himself for caring. He wanted to bury it, to smother it under work, wealth, and women's laughter. Yet in the darkness, with no one to perform for, Adrian could not deny it. Her choice had touched something he thought had died long ago. And no matter how he tried to resist, the pull toward her only grew stronger. Have you ever tried to ignore something, or someone, that kept tugging at your heart anyway? What happened when you finally faced it? Share your story in the comments. The spring rain came suddenly. One moment the sky above Manhattan was clear, the next it cracked open with thunder and poured sheets of silver down the city streets. Adrian's sleek black car rolled to a stop in front of St. Augustine's Community Center. His mother's charity gala was in full swing inside, but a downed power line had caused chaos, caterers trapped, guests waiting impatiently, and his staff scrambling. Adrian stepped out, irritation flickering in his jaw. This was supposed to be a showcase of the Callister family's generosity. Instead, it was descending into disorder. Inside, he found his mother's voice cutting sharply through the din. Adrian. Thank heavens. Half the catering staff can't make it through the storm. We need hands, real ones. He raised an eyebrow. Mother, I'm hardly. Not you, she snapped. Her eyes darted to where Maria stood, clutching a stack of folded napkins, rain dripping from her hair. Her. She's been steady all evening. Put her at your side. At least one of you will get something done. Adrian turned, surprised. Maria's uniform clung to her from the rain, strands of dark hair plastered against her cheek. She looked like she'd been pulled into this against her will, which in a way she had. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken tension sparking between them. For once, Adrian didn't argue. Perhaps it was the storm, or perhaps it was that same inexplicable pull he'd been trying to bury since the card incident. Fine, he said curtly. You'll assist me. Maria nodded, her expression unreadable. Yes, sir. The next hours bound them together in ways neither expected. They moved through crowded rooms shoulder to shoulder, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres, fetching supplies, calming guests who grumbled about the storm. Adrian was used to commanding boardrooms, not ferrying drinks. Yet here he was, juggling wine glasses beside his maid, both of them drenched and breathless. At first, they spoke little. But silence is its own kind of intimacy, especially when two people move in rhythm. He noticed how she steadied trays with one hand and guided flustered volunteers with the other, quiet authority hidden in her modest posture. She noticed how his polished composure cracked when an elderly donor complained about soggy canapes. His sigh, his muttered curse, so human it startled her. When the storm knocked out the lights, plunging the hall into flickering candlelight, something shifted. Maria lit votive candles along the tables, her face glowing softly in the flame. Adrian caught himself watching, too long, too intently. She looked less like a maid and more like something else. They crossed paths in the storeroom when both reached for a stack of tablecloths. Their hands brushed, only for a second, but long enough to freeze them both. Sorry, Maria murmured, pulling back quickly. Adrian's throat tightened. Don't apologize. You're the only one holding this together. She looked at him then, eyes steady, almost defiant. That's not true. You've done your part. The words were simple, but the way she said them, the sincerity, landed heavily. Adrian wasn't used to people seeing past the surface, let alone crediting him with something real. He opened his mouth to reply, but Veronica's voice cut through the moment like glass shattering. Adrian, what are you doing back here in the dark? She appeared in the doorway, her diamond necklace glittering even in candlelight. Her eyes narrowed when they fell on Maria. Maria lowered her gaze instantly, stepping back into the shadows. Working, Adrian said sharply, straightening. Something you might try. Veronica gasped, affronted, but before she could retort, another guest called her name, and she swept out with a huff. The silence she left behind was thick, charged. Adrian turned back to Maria, but she was already slipping past him, tray in hand, retreating into the crowd. By midnight, the storm had eased, the guests had departed, and the community center was quiet. Adrian stood outside beneath the dripping awning, his coat around his shoulders. Maria emerged carrying a box of leftover food donations. He stepped forward. Leave it. I'll have someone else. I've got it, she interrupted gently. Her determination made him smile despite himself. You're stubborn. And you're not used to people saying no. The corner of his mouth tugged upward. Fair enough. For a moment, they stood there, the rain soft around them, the city humming in the distance. Neither spoke of the card, of the laughter, of the memory still raw between them. But something unspoken hung in the air, an invisible thread pulling them closer. Maria shifted the box in her arms. Good night, sir. He wanted to stop her, to ask something, anything, that would keep her standing there a moment longer. Instead, he swallowed the impulse and let her walk into the night, her figure fading into the mist. Adrian lingered, staring at the spot where she'd disappeared. Forced proximity had done what he feared, it had broken down walls he had spent years building. And the truth he dreaded most pressed against him, he didn't want those walls back. The days after the charity event passed with a subtle shift neither Adrian nor Maria could name. They spoke more now, not much, and not often, but enough to notice. A quiet thank you when she handed him coffee. A small nod when their eyes met across the hall. Nothing grand, nothing the other staff would remark upon, but something undeniable simmered beneath the surface. Adrian hated how much he anticipated those small exchanges. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. Yet when he caught himself listening for her footsteps in the corridor, he knew he was lying. One evening, restless, Adrian wandered into the rarely used east wing of the mansion. It was quiet here, away from the laughter of Veronica and Lila, who had once again invited themselves over. He found Maria in the library, dusting books that hadn't been touched in years. She startled when he entered. I didn't expect. I didn't either, he admitted, glancing at the shelves. His gaze landed on a spine he hadn't seen in decades, a children's book about a girl and her brother, read so many times it was frayed. His throat tightened. Maria noticed the shift in his expression. This book means something to you. He hesitated, then pulled it down. My sister's favorite. She used to make me read it to her every night when she was sick. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. She never got better. Maria froze, her cloth still in hand. She had never heard him speak so softly, so human. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Adrian nodded, his jaw tight. You bought insulin. My sister needed the same. No amount of money saved her. He let out a bitter laugh. And still, I thought money was the only shield I needed. Maria's heart ached at the vulnerability in his tone. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire, not the shield of arrogance, but a man carrying a wound that had never healed. The silence stretched until Adrian turned, almost defensively. What about you? Why medicine? Why not? Because dreams don't pay for medicine, Maria said, her voice firmer than she expected. Adrian looked at her. Dreams. She hesitated, then exhaled slowly. I used to paint. I thought one day I might make something beautiful. But then my father got sick. Hospital bills stacked higher than canvases ever could. So I traded paintbrushes for mops. Her words landed like a quiet confession, not bitter, not self-pitying, just truth. Adrian's chest tightened again. He imagined her painting, her eyes lit with passion instead of exhaustion. The thought unsettled him, a reminder of all the invisible sacrifices people made beyond the world of wealth he lived in. Do you regret it? He asked softly. Maria's lips curved faintly, though her eyes shone. No. My father is still here. That's worth more than regret. The simple sincerity of her answer struck him harder than any business rival ever had. Later that night, Adrian found himself in his study, staring at the children's book on his desk. Memories flooded back, his sister's laughter, the way she clutched the book even as her hands trembled. He hadn't spoken of her in years. Not to friends, not to lovers, not even to his mother. And yet tonight the maid, the invisible one, had pulled the truth from him with nothing but quiet presence. For Maria, the moment lingered too. As she walked home in the cool night air, she replayed his words. He had trusted her with a piece of his grief, the kind of wound money couldn't heal. She felt the weight of it, not as a burden, but as an honor. But it also frightened her. Because the more she saw his humanity, the more dangerous her heart became. The following afternoon, Adrian sought her out in the garden where she trimmed roses. You said you painted, he began, almost awkward. Maria looked up, startled. Yes. A long time ago. He hesitated, then said, show me. She blinked. I don't have anything left. I sold it all years ago. Adrian frowned, almost frustrated by the thought. Then paint again. He stopped, realizing how it sounded. Not because of me. For yourself. Her eyes softened, but she shook her head. It's too late for dreams, sir. The words pricked him. He hated them. Hated that she believed them. That night, as the city lights shimmered against his windows, Adrian understood something he had avoided for years. Money had built his walls, but it could not heal the wounds inside. And now, for the first time since his sister's death, he felt the fragile stirrings of something he thought impossible, hope. It wasn't hope for himself alone. It was hope tied to the maid who had bought medicine instead of diamonds. The maid who carried her father's burden with quiet strength. The maid who saw him not as a billionaire, but as a broken man. And though Adrian didn't yet know how, he realized he wanted to give her more than his card. He wanted to give her back what she thought she had lost, her dreams. The mansion felt strangely alive the following week. For once, Adrian wasn't avoiding his home. He spent less time in boardrooms, more in the spaces Maria often occupied, the gardens, the library, the kitchen at odd hours. He never admitted it, but every step seemed guided by a quiet need to be near her. Maria noticed, of course. She noticed the way he lingered by the doorway while she arranged flowers. The way he asked questions he could easily have asked anyone else. Small unnecessary things, like, how do you keep roses from wilting? She answered politely, but inside, her heart was betraying her. One evening, a storm rolled in, thunder rattling the mansion's windows. Power flickered, plunging the halls into shadows. Staff scurried about lighting candles, but Maria was sent to the kitchen to keep things in order. When Adrian appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, Maria nearly dropped the ladle she was holding. "You?" she asked, startled. He smirked. "The storm killed the power. I thought I'd check if you needed help." She arched a brow. "Since when does a billionaire offer to stir soup?" "Since tonight," he replied simply, stepping inside. To her astonishment, he did stir the pot clumsily, his movements so awkward she laughed out loud. The sound startled them both, light, unguarded, cutting through the storm outside. Adrian froze, then grinned. "You're laughing at me." "Only because you look like you're negotiating a hostile takeover with that spoon," she teased. His laughter joined hers, rich and unpolished, unlike the practiced chuckles he gave at parties. For a moment, the kitchen felt less like a workplace and more like home. Later, when the soup was done, they sat at the long servants' table, eating together from chipped bowls. Maria had never imagined sharing a meal with him like this, quiet, equal. "You know," Adrian said between spoonfuls, "I don't remember the last time I ate like this. No crystal, no 12 courses. Just soup." Maria smiled faintly. Sometimes simple things taste better. He studied her, the candlelight softening his sharp features. "Maybe I've forgotten what simple feels like." Their eyes lingered too long. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile but undeniable. A few nights later, Adrian surprised her again. Maria found a canvas and a box of paints in the library, propped against the wall. Her breath caught. "What is this?" "You said you used to paint," Adrian said casually, though his tone carried weight. "So I thought you should again." Maria shook her head, overwhelmed. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because it's too much." Her eyes glistened. "Because no one has ever remembered that about me." Adrian's chest tightened. "Then let me be the first." Silence filled the space. Slowly, Maria touched the canvas, her fingers trembling. That night, she painted for the first time in years. Adrian watched from the corner, quiet, as colors bloomed beneath her brush. For once, she wasn't just the maid, she was an artist again. And for once, Adrian wasn't the billionaire, he was simply a man watching someone he cared for rediscover herself. The bond between them grew in small, tender ways. He noticed how she hummed softly when she worked, and one evening, he asked her to sing the tune aloud. Her voice was shy, but it filled the room with warmth. She noticed how his laughter faded when children passed on the street, and one day, he admitted he'd once dreamed of being a father before loss hardened him. They began to carry each other's truths like fragile treasures, never demanding, never pressing, just holding. If you're ready to hear the full story, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be dropping another story just as wild as this one, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Now, let's dive right in. Yet even in their moments of peace, shadows lingered. Maria knew Veronica and Lila watched her with narrowed eyes, jealousy simmering in their stares. And Adrian knew what society would say if he allowed his heart to drift toward the maid. But for now, none of that mattered. For now, there was only the storm-softened laughter in the kitchen, the shared soup at the servants' table, and the colors blooming on canvas in a forgotten library. One evening, as Maria cleaned her brushes, Adrian spoke softly. "You remind me of something I thought I'd lost." She looked up, puzzled. What's that? Hope. Her breath caught. The word hung between them, delicate, dangerous, beautiful. Maria lowered her gaze, afraid of what she might see in his eyes if she held them too long. But her heart, traitorous and unguarded, whispered a truth she would not yet speak. She was falling for him. And though Adrian didn't say it aloud, he already knew. The painting in the library had become Maria's secret sanctuary. Each evening, after finishing her duties, she would spend a quiet hour with the canvas, coaxing colors into life. Adrian often lingered nearby, never intruding, sometimes pretending to read but always watching. It was in those hushed hours that their bond deepened, unspoken but undeniable. But fragile things are easiest to break. One evening, Veronica arrived unannounced, glittering in an emerald dress. She sashayed into the library, her laugh sharp against the quiet. Adrian rose, surprised, as Maria froze mid-brushstroke. "Darling," Veronica purred, sweeping her arms wide. "I've missed you. I thought I'd bring you a little gift." She produced a small velvet box and pressed it into his hand. An engagement ring. Maria's breath hitched. Adrian's face hardened. "Veronica." "Don't look so grim," she interrupted, feigning innocence. "Everyone knows we belong together. And if you're wondering why I know your little secret," she turned, eyes glittering as they landed on Maria. "It seems your maid has been keeping you occupied." Maria's face burned. "That's enough," Adrian snapped. Veronica ignored him, advancing toward Maria. "Did you think no one would notice? The way he looks at you, the way you linger in corners together? How clever, you traded a mop for a millionaire." Maria's hand trembled around her brush. "That's not." "Stop." Adrian's voice was low, but the damage was done. Veronica smirked, satisfied. "Careful, Adrian. If word gets out, your reputation won't survive. Investors don't like scandals, and neither does society." With that, she swept out, leaving silence in her wake. Maria set down her brush, unable to meet Adrian's eyes. "She's right," she whispered. "People will talk." "Maria. You've already given me too much. The paints, the canvas, your time." Her voice cracked. "But this can't happen. I can't be the reason you lose everything." His chest tightened. "I don't care what people think." "You should." She finally looked at him, tears brimming. "Because I do." Her words sliced through him, harsher than Veronica's venom. "Don't you see?" Adrian pressed, desperate. "I've never cared about anyone like this. You're not just," he stopped himself, afraid to say Maid, afraid to hurt her. "You're Maria. You're the only one who's ever seen me." But Maria shook her head, stepping back. "And that's exactly why I have to go." That night, Maria didn't return to the library. She didn't return the next night either. Adrian prowled the halls like a restless shadow, waiting for her footsteps, for the sound of brushes against canvas. But there was only silence. In her absence, the mansion felt like a mausoleum. The laughter of Veronica and Lila grated like nails. Even his mother's sharp remarks couldn't pierce the numbness. Everywhere he turned, reminders of Maria haunted him. The unfinished painting, the chipped soup bowls, the faint hum of a tune she used to sing while working. He had never realized how much light she had brought into his world, until it was gone. For Maria, leaving the library felt like tearing herself apart. She avoided Adrian as much as possible, burying herself in chores until her hands ached. She told herself it was necessary, that she was protecting him, but every night her chest ached with the absence of his voice, his quiet laughter. Her father noticed, too. One evening, as she sat silently at their small kitchen table, he placed his hand over hers. "You've been carrying something heavy," he said softly. Maria's throat tightened. "I don't want to hurt him." "Maybe," her father said gently, "you already have." Tears filled her eyes, but she said nothing. A week later, Adrian found her in the garden, trimming roses. The sight of her, so close and yet so unreachable, unraveled him. "Maria." His voice was raw. She kept her eyes on the roses. "Sir." The formality stung. "I can't keep pretending," he said, stepping closer. "Not when every day without you feels like losing my sister all over again." Empty. Silent. Gone. Her hands stilled. Slowly, she looked up, tears trembling in her lashes. You can't say things like that, she whispered. Not when I can't give you what you need. What I need is you, Adrian said fiercely. Not Veronica. Not society's approval. You. Maria shook her head, heart-shattering. I can't. I won't survive being your scandal. She turned away, leaving him standing among the roses, their petals scattered like broken promises at his feet. That night, alone in his study, Adrian poured himself a drink he didn't want and stared at the children's book on his desk. He traced the frayed spine with trembling fingers, his sister's laughter echoing faintly in his mind. You'd hate me for this, wouldn't you? He whispered to the empty room. For ruining something good before it even began. For the first time in years, tears blurred his vision. He buried his face in his hands and let them fall. Maria, alone in her small apartment across the city, wept too. 2 hearts, shattered. 2 souls, aching for each other yet torn apart by fear. The week after the confrontation in the garden stretched into a haze of silence. Maria worked as though wrapped in glass, present but unreachable. Adrian, meanwhile, threw himself into meetings, late-night calls, anything that would keep him from returning to the empty mansion where her absence pressed him like a weight. But grief, like a tide, always finds its way back. One night, Adrian found himself standing before the library again. The unfinished painting waited on the easel, brushes stiff with dried paint, colors abandoned mid-stroke. He traced the canvas lightly, his chest aching at the thought of her hand stopping here, at this very place, because of him. He sank into the chair by the fire, head in his hands. For the first time in his life, the empire he'd built felt meaningless. All the money, all the power, none of it could bring Maria back into this room, laughing softly as she mixed colors. The thought rose unbidden, if I can't have her, what am I even fighting for? Across the city, Maria sat with her father at their small kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as he studied her face. You've been quiet, he said gently. I don't want to talk about it, she whispered. He reached across, taking her hand in his calloused one. Maria. I know that look. I saw it in your mother before she passed. That look of loving someone and trying to hide it until it ate her alive. Maria's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to hurt him. If people knew. Her father's gaze softened. And what about you? You've given up enough dreams for this family. Don't give up the one thing that might make your heart whole. Maria bowed her head, sobs trembling through her shoulders. The next morning, Adrian made his decision. He stormed into a board meeting, ignoring the startled faces of his executives. Veronica sat at the far end, smug as ever. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian said, voice sharp, I'm done hiding. I don't care about whispers. I don't care about investors clutching their pearls. I care about truth. Veronica stiffened. Adrian. No, he cut her off. You may have the board fooled, Veronica, but you don't have me. I won't spend another second living by other people's rules. Not when the only person who's ever seen me is the one you mocked. He slammed his folder shut and walked out, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Meanwhile, Maria carried a bundle of linens down the hall of the mansion when she overheard 2 staff members whispering. Did you hear? Mr. Callister walked out of the board meeting this morning. Told Veronica off in front of everyone. All because of. Their voices dropped, but Maria didn't need to hear the name. Her heart raced, knees weak beneath her. She fled to the garden, clutching the linens to her chest, tears streaming before she could stop them. That evening, Adrian found her there. She turned when she heard his footsteps, her face blotched from crying. You shouldn't have done that, she said, voice breaking. They'll ruin you. I don't care, Adrian said simply. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. Maria, I've lived half my life hiding behind money and the other half running from grief. You taught me that life is too short to keep hiding. Her breath hitched. But what if we fail? What if they're right? Then let them be right, he said, eyes burning into hers. I'd rather lose everything than lose you. The words hung in the air, raw and irrevocable. Maria's heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, but fear clutched at her ribs. Fear of scandal, of heartbreak, of daring to reach for something she had no right to. But then she remembered her father's words, his weary smile when he told her not to give up her chance at love. She remembered the way Adrian had looked in the library, breaking open about his sister. She remembered soup in chipped bowls, laughter during storms, and colors blooming on canvas again. All of it, every fragile moment, was love. Slowly, trembling, Maria lowered the linens from her arms and whispered, "I'm so afraid." Adrian stepped closer, closing the space between them. "So am I. But maybe that means it's real." Her tears spilled over, but this time she didn't turn away. That night, for the first time, Maria allowed herself to believe that love, unexpected, impossible love, might actually be hers to hold. And Adrian, for the first time in years, believed his heart was worth giving again. Two choices made, not in wealth or status, but in vulnerability. The mansion buzzed with quiet anticipation the following week. Adrian's mother had insisted on hosting a second charity gala, this time not for the city's elites, but for families who had benefited directly from the foundation's medical programs. No glittering gowns, no diamond necklaces, just parents and children who had known hardship, like Maria once did. Adrian stood at the entrance, greeting guests with a warmth that startled even himself. For the first time in years, he wasn't hiding behind polished charm. He was present, real. But his gaze kept searching the crowd for one face. Maria hesitated in the back hallway, clutching a tray of drinks. She wasn't supposed to attend, maids didn't mingle with guests, but tonight she'd been asked to help. Her stomach twisted at the thought of standing in the same room as Adrian, after everything they'd confessed in the garden. Her father's words echoed in her chest, "Don't give up the one thing that might make your heart whole." Taking a steadying breath, she stepped into the glow of the ballroom. Their eyes met instantly across the crowd. For a moment, the room faded. It was only him and her. Adrian's lips curved, soft and certain, as if he had been waiting all night just for this. Halfway through the evening, Adrian took the stage. The hum of chatter quieted as he leaned into the microphone, his gaze sweeping the room. "Years ago, I thought money could solve everything. I thought generosity meant writing a check big enough to silence the world's pain. But someone showed me otherwise." Maria froze at the edge of the room, her breath caught. "She showed me that real generosity is not diamonds or luxury, it's a vial of insulin that saves a life. It's choosing humility over indulgence. It's love in its simplest, purest form." His voice broke slightly on the word love. The audience erupted into applause, unaware of the full story behind his words. But Maria knew. And tears blurred her vision. After the speeches, children gathered near a donation table filled with supplies, medicine, clothes, books. Adrian moved among them, kneeling to tie a boy's shoelace, handing a girl a new backpack. His suit and status seemed to fall away. Maria watched, heart swelling. This was the man she had seen beneath the walls. This was the man she loved. When he finally reached her, the crowd's noise melted to a dull hum. "You came," he said softly. She nodded, trembling. "I had to." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, his sleek black credit card. Maria blinked, startled. "I gave this away once to test greed," he said, voice low enough for only her. "But you taught me it isn't about what's bought. It's about why." He pressed the card gently into her hand. "So I'm giving it to you again. Not as a test. Not as a trap. As a promise." Her fingers closed around it, trembling. "A promise of what?" "That I trust you with everything I have. My wealth. My heart. My life." His eyes glistened. "Maria, I don't want you to be my maid. I want you to be my partner. My equal. My love." The room spun. Maria's breath shook. She had never imagined a future where such words could be meant for her. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, "Adrian, are you sure?" He smiled softly. "I've never been more sure of anything." She dropped the tray of drinks onto a nearby table and threw her arms around him. The crowd gasped, then applauded, mistaking it for a grand romantic gesture staged for the gala. But for Adrian and Maria, it was no performance, it was everything. He held her tightly, his lips at her ear. "You've already given me more than I could ever give you." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, her voice trembling. "Then let's never stop giving." And then for the first time they kissed, not in secrecy, not in fear, but in front of the world. A kiss that spoke of loss and healing, fear and courage, endings and new beginnings. Later that night, long after the guests had gone, Adrian led Maria back into the library. The unfinished painting still stood on its easel. "Will you finish it?" he asked gently. Maria looked at him, then at the blank spaces still waiting for color. She dipped her brush, her hand steady now, and began to paint again, with Adrian standing beside her, not watching from the shadows but present. The canvas bloomed with light and hope. And so did their hearts. The mansion, once a prison of wealth and silence, became something new in the weeks that followed. Laughter echoed in the halls. Maria painted, Adrian read aloud from his sister's book, and sometimes they simply sat in quiet companionship, the storm of the world outside unable to touch them. They had chosen love. Against fear, against expectation, against everything. And they had won. If someone handed you a limitless card, what would you buy? And what would that choice say about your heart? Would you choose comfort, luxury, or something selfless like Maria did? Let's talk about what really matters. Thank you so much for watching this story until the end. I truly hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another beautiful and inspiring story. We've got plenty more waiting for you, so go ahead and click on the next video on your screen now to continue the journey.